Hi, my name is Craig Fraser, and what I'm going to show you in this video is modification of the Candy 2.0 Dirt Track Brown. Now, normally you can modify candy by spraying over a different base, a different metallic, or even adding metallics and pearls or flake to a candy itself. What we're going to do is we're going to take and modify the candy with another candy. What we've done is we've created a base candy that is just the Dirt Track Brown candy, 50-50 with 40-30 with about 10% of the 40-12 added to it. We already have that all mixed up right here. And on this board behind me, I put 3 designs down that I sprayed with Quicksilver Chrome. And that's a very, very fine pigmented aluminum silver that we make here with Cratex. The reason I like using that for these demos is it dries very quickly, very flat, and it's very durable. You can tape on it without any problems of lifting, and candy loves to stick on top of it. And when the light hits it, it really, really gives a nice bright reflectivity. It doesn't have a lot of sparkle in it, which is actually kind of cool, because I like sparkle, I like that pearlescent look, but this just gives a great reflectivity like bare aluminum, like actually painting candy on bare aluminum. So I want to go with that effect. And to start out, I'm going to create a control element where I'm just going to show the Dirt Track Brown just in its pure form, about maybe 4 coats or so on top. Minimum is 3 coats. Maximum, I usually tell people, is anywhere at 8 to 9 coats. We're going to go right in the middle of that. And that's going to be our base color. And then what we're going to do is we're going to show how we're going to deviate in 2 different directions with this Dirt Track Brown to create a brown that may be similar to another candy you see out there. We've had a lot of compliments on the Dirt Track Brown. They love the color, they love the name, but they also say, I wish it was a little bit more maybe root beerish, or maybe a little bit more sepia or tin type, like I'm doing a mural that looks like a tin type, an old sepia panel. And it's close, but it's a little bit to this color, to that. It doesn't take much to modify the color a little bit in each direction, and we're going to show you how to do that today. So first off, I'm going to take my TH airbrush, and we're going to add in a little bit of this premix we have going on here of the Dirt Track Brown. It's got the fan head on it, and this is a little mini spray gun. If you're using a full-size spray gun, you're going to go with the same mixture we have here. I like this one for small items. It gives about a 2 to 3 inch fan pattern and acts very much like a spray gun. This airbrush also has a removable tip and gives an airbrush pattern as well, but for coverage, you want to go with the fan pattern. So first off, we're going to come in and just do a light coat over this silver. Make sure your Quicksilver is dry. It doesn't take long. If you're going to mask on Quicksilver, you want it to be dry for about an hour. But if you're going to spray on it, you just need maybe 15 minutes and you can spray on it no problem. The first light coat goes on lightly and we dry it. Then the second coat I'll come in and I'll hit it a little bit heavier with about a 3/4 overlap on the little spear graphic in the middle. So here you can see the color really starting to come out. Now, we always say with these candies, you want a minimum of 3 coats. This is 2 we have down right now. The reason being is these colors will tend to look a little mottled when you're spraying them, especially with the full-size spray gun. And the first couple of coats, you'll be spraying like, it looks uneven, looks kind of mottled. That's nothing to be worried about. That actually will level off at around 3 coats, hence the term, minimum 3 coats. The color won't really start getting full body until after 3 coats anyway, and then some of the colors look really good when you get like 8 or 9 coats going, because it has a really deep luster to it. And I'm just spraying air on it. You don't want to use heat. If you're using like a hair dryer or a heat gun, go with the lowest setting and try and be careful. Keep your hand in there to make sure it's not getting too hot, because if it gets hot, it'll seal and create a skin on the outside of the paint, which can trap moisture inside. We want air motion to actually force the moisture out of the paint. So air motion is the best tool to dry this paint. That's a good color right there. And I'd go a little bit darker. No, yes, I'm going to leave that. That's actually a good medium coat. Some colors need a little bit more to get them to come out. That right there is the Dirt Track Brown color. Now, looking at that, what if I wanted to make it a little bit more root beery? Like more of a root beer color. And that has a little bit more of a reddish brown to it. Almost there's like a little bit of a pink tint in that. And so how do we add that? Well, basically to add more of a pink or more of a red tint to it, we would add another candy to be close to it. Red would be a little bit too much. I think if we added red to this, it would just really, it would look good. It might be a kind of a cool color, but you wouldn't get that root beer look. I think we're going to go with a little bit of magenta. Not a lot, because you add too much, it's going to look like a dirty pink or like a dirty magenta. We'll add a little bit of the Sunset Magenta to it, and I'll just add it right into the airbrush, and then we're going to come in and spray a little bit down here so you can see by comparison what that small modification will do. Okay, I've given this time to dry, and what's important about that, since I'm spraying nearby, I'm not really going to protect it and cover it up and mask on it, so I don't need to wait for it to dry that well. But you want it to not be wet. If it's wet and you're spraying nearby, the wet paint actually acts as a magnet. Any overspray that may normally just wipe off or not even stick onto it will actually stick to your wet paint. So made sure that was good and dry, and then I did a real quick little color swatch just for my own, sampling, and this is going to allow me to spray the color before I actually put it on down below. I want to add just a little bit of the Sunset Magenta, and I've got it right here. Now I'm not going to, I'll add a little bit more brown to this airbrush, but I'm not going to add any more 40-30. We'll be fine with that. And also, when you're adding 40-30, never add 40-30 directly into your airbrush. It's always better to mix that separately, because sometimes just adding 40-30 right on top, it doesn't mix as well, and it can kind of shock the pigment a little bit. So it's always better to do your full mixing. You can add candy and a little bit of reducer and do all those adds to your airbrush, but full mixing in the airbrush is not really the best idea. Got my magenta in here, and this magenta is pretty strong of a color, so I don't want to add too much. I'm going to actually just try by going with, like, let's try 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I think that was 9, but we'll say 8 drops. 8 drops in there. Doesn't sound like a lot considering I got a ½ ounce of paint in there. Maybe a 1/4 ounce actually. I think the airbrush itself only holds 1 ounce. And spray out the leftover, because when you mix it up, there's always a little bit of paint down there, like maybe about 1 second of spray. And then I'll spray this down and see what kind of color we get before I actually put it on that silver. Also, it's a great way of figuring out how dominant your candy is. Some candies are more dominant than others. In this case, I'm kind of curious as to whether the magenta candy, the Sunset Magenta, is more dominant than the Dirt Track Brown. In this case, it looks like I can see a little bit of a hint of magenta in there. I don't want to change this to pink. So I kind of took instead of just pouring like 50-50, I'd find out the hard way which one is more dominant. By just using a few drops, you can kind of see it. And notice the paper, you look at this doesn't match as well. Well, I'm going over white here, that's silver. In the sunlight, that'll actually appear at certain angles brighter than this paper will, because silver reflects more than white in direct light. The difference is silver in non-direct light does not reflect as well. That's why the paper is not a true example, but it gives me a good idea of, like, this color is much deeper on here than that one with a little bit of a red tint. I think that's going to give me a nice root beer. I want to just pop it a little bit more. I'm going to cheat and add a few more drops. Now, what happens if this few more drops is like too much? I probably add 5 more drops. If that's too much, I can come in and add more root beer. It's not the end of the world. That's why I never fill my airbrush more than half full. Now, if I was doing a large area and I'm doing this experiment, as soon as I get the color right, I'll do a test swatch on something really good that's the same material color. Then I'll go and I'll mix a large batch to match to my test swatch. Maybe throw it in a bottle, save it for later, whatever. There's always different ways of doing it. Let's see how this one sprays. I added more magenta to it. Yeah, I kind of like that. That's a little bit more. We're going to go with that one right there. Got some dust on there. So I'm going to come in with a light coat of this modified Dirt Track Brown with this Sunset Magenta. Light coat on there and the spray air. Get nice and dry before I come with my wet coat. And then come in and do a 3/4 overlap. Nice. It's probably 1.5 coats on there because I kind of backed up over it. Something this small, I'll kind of eyeball the coats. Something large, you want to be very meticulous on the number of coats you do and how you do them. Keep on drying. At an angle here, I can see it when it dries. You see it, it kind of satin out and the moisture is escaping it. Always touch it a little bit on the side. But remember, the tape will always absorb and dry faster than the surface will. So be careful on using just the tape. There you go. I don't like that. Now at an angle, I can see the color difference. A little bit redder. You know, I mean, and granted, when you say root beer, it depends on what root beer you're talking about. There's a lot of different root beers out there. And the coloring, of course, makes a difference on that root beer. But this one right here is darker and has a deeper, richer red than this one. This was a little bit more almost like a dirt track brown. It's like a dirt, like a clay dirt, but this one a little bit deeper red in there. Now, the next one we're going to do is we're going to take this base color again, but I'm going to add some Tequila Yellow to it, and we're going to sepia tint that out. I recently did a logo and a painting for a good buddy of mine's restaurant that's opening up, and that painting alone, just the color I used on the painting, has now dictated the entire color scheme of this guy's restaurant and a nightclub, because we're going to do the entire thing like sepia tones, and they're all based on these colors. As a matter of fact, the main color I used was a combination of dirt track brown with some of the Tequila Yellow. So we're going to go ahead and make that mix next and show you that one. That one's going to be a little more drastic because I couldn't really go too darker than this without it going black. I want to be careful with that. This one we're actually going to go a little bit lighter, so it's going to be probably a little bit more dominant with the Tequila Yellow, and that way we can continue building up. Plus, when I did the artwork, I did the sepia tones first, then I came in with the dirt track brown in a pure form and was able to layer up and add more color to it. So just a way you can take these colors, mix them around, make them your own to create and design anything you want. So let me empty this out so I can go back to my base dirt track brown, and we'll add that Tequila Yellow. Okay, cleaned my airbrush out really good and made sure I've got the pure dirt track brown in here. And I didn't put as much in here because I'm going to add a little bit more of the Tequila Yellow, and I've got that right here. Make sure you give it a good shake, and to hear that rattling ball in there, that means it's mixing. If you shake it and you don't hear a rattling ball, it's either empty, or you might want to make sure that your seal is gone. Sometimes if that seal is closed right there, you won't hear the rattle because it's kind of pressurized. So make sure that seal's popped off of there. And I'm going to go ahead and add, I'm literally going to go like quite a bit, like 50-50 on this, which is a lot. And because I'm pretty sure Tequila Yellow is not as dominant. I may be wrong on this, but I don't think it's as dominant as the dirt track brown. So spray a little bit, get that out of there, and come in. Yeah, notice that it's not only so dominant, it completely kicked tequila. It completely kicked the dirt track brown's butt on this one. It's almost all tequila on that. Let me make sure it's mixed good. Spray a little bit more. Yeah, we need a little bit more dirt track brown. Luckily, I've got more room in there because I didn't put a lot in there. There we go. Poor dirt track brown got killed by tequila. I didn't think tequila was that strong, but I guess I was wrong. And there we go. A little bit, that's the color I'm looking for. See? Real nice yellowy, kind of almost has a sandy gold color to it. So that's the color I'm looking for. Come back in here and do a light coat. Spray air on it. Now, if you're wondering, when I came in and added that dirt track brown, how much more do I add to it? Well, I went 1-to-1, and that was way too much. So I came back in and added one more part to it. So actually, what it is, it's now 2-to-1. It's 2 parts of the dirt track brown to 1 part of the tequila. That's what we have in here right now, if you're wondering. It's always good to keep track of that. Always keep track of it until you find the color you like, and then that's the one you write down. Otherwise, you don't keep track of it, the one color you get is the one you forgot how to made, and you'll be chasing it backwards for a while. But yeah, that's what reverse engineering is for. Now I'm letting this dry. Look, it looks a little on the mottled side. It's going to be that way. The lighter the candy, the more it's going to look mottled in the early stages. But remember, you've got to go minimum 3 coats anyway. We've only done 2. You come in here, little 3/4 overlap. And we got our 3rd coat, and I'm going to come in and probably just do maybe 1, at the most 2 more coats. Spray the air under, get nice and dry. It's a real light coat on top. A lot of times on small items like this, I'll just eyeball it. Come in, eyeball it, see where I like the color instead of just being really precise. If I get a color where I really like it, I'll keep note of how much paint approximately I put on there. Now, let's say you're just using an airbrush on a small item like this and you did like 4 coats and you're like, okay, so when I do a full-size car, I'm going to do 4 coats. Do a test panel. With a full-size spray gun, 4 coats is much different than 4 coats with an airbrush. Matter of fact, 4 coats with an airbrush that has an airbrush nozzle is much different than 4 coats with a fan nozzle. Even a small touch-up gun. Anytime you're switching anything when you're painting, you always want to take that into account and do a test panel. You're never going to do too many test panels. Trust me on that one. And that's why I even had this sucker here. This is my test panel for my test panel. So basically, the moral of the story is here, if you want to make any changes with your candies, you can do it in multiple ways. Layers, the base you put down, or in this case, how many colors you add to it. We can add just a little bit of a candy, and that modified our brown to create the root beer color down here. We can add a lot of candy to it, which was in this case the Tequila Yellow, and it created quite a bit of a different color up there, almost like a Spanish gold color up at the top. So both of these, very different colors, all based off of the Dirt Track Brown. And this is only one color out of 17 of the Candy 2.0 colors. Feel free to experiment and try using the candies to tint and modify and shade your colors, as well as try different techniques, different bases, different metallics, different applications to make everything you paint your own. So until next time, my name is Craig Fraser. I'll see you then.